It was a tough night for the Phoenix Suns and their fans Sunday night. We've had a day to think, how can this translate to positivity regarding mindset strength for the Arizona Cardinals? Plus, Mike Golic Jr. is going to join me for 2 segments. Giddy up.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, it's Alex Clancy. I'm your host of Locked On Cardinals. Follow me on Twitter at Clancy's Corner. Follow the podcast at Locked On AZ Cards. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel as well. Thank you for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen each and every day, free and available on all platforms. Mike Golic Jr., Thick Six himself, is going to join me for the next 2 segments. We're going to talk Arizona Cardinals offseason. And then the final segment, I want to pick his brain about the offensive line. I want to hear from a guy that played offensive line in college. He's been around the NFL game for a long time, what his thoughts are about the importance of the interior of the offensive line specifically. And I'm going to ask him about his love for Rodney Hudson because I know he played center in college, and I know that he's probably got some mad love for the all-pro Rodney Hudson. I teased during the cold open about the Phoenix Suns. Like, this isn't a pile-on at all, and it's not going to be even, 0.1%. Brendan Clean does a great job over at Locked On Suns. I texted him. He was as surprised as everybody what happened on Sunday night when the Suns got ran out of their own gym in Game 7 after being up 3-2. Now, that's the end of it. But this is something that, as Arizona Cardinals players, I'm assuming that, they have some sort of tie, some sort of hometown love for the Phoenix Suns, regardless of where, they grew up or where their loyalties lie elsewhere, that they keep to themselves about their favorite teams. Watching a hometown team lose the way in which they did on the heels of the Arizona Cardinals losing the way in which they did against the Rams in the playoffs last year, it's going to resonate. Both are going to resonate. By osmosis, maybe, but tangentially, even though the Suns don't have a direct correlation to the Arizona Cardinals, besides playing for the teams in the same city, that's got to reverberate around the Arizona Cardinals locker room in some capacity. Like, okay, what happened to us? I'm talking about the Cardinals. As an Arizona Cardinal, what happened to us wasn't great last year. Started hot, started 10-2, and then went out the way that we did. Again, talking as Arizona Cardinal, not me. I don't talk in the we pronoun when it comes to the team that I, cover or whatever. And then you see what happened with the Suns in Game 7. It's like, okay, so say the downfall of last year and the playoff game loss was, let's say it was a wedding cake. Okay, let's say it was a wedding cake, all right? All the way, 4 layers, however many layer cakes the damn wedding things are. And the Suns' loss last night was like the floral frosting on the bottom layer. So it wasn't like, the husband and wife on top. It wasn't the icing on the cake. It wasn't a focal point of said wedding cake, of the memory of last year's playoff loss, but it was a floral frosting arrangement on the bottom level of the wedding cake. It was something that Cardinals will think about, but not be in the forefront of their mind. Like, oh, it was like having some sort of retroactive, one of those feelings watching the Suns and then thinking about the Cardinals. Now, this is going to be a different year. It seems like doesn't seem like Kyler Murray is a year older. Okay, DeAndre Hopkins is out for the first 6 weeks. Their schedule is more difficult than last year. But that's not to say that this Cardinals team can't expound upon how they started last year. Maybe not start as hot, because you can't start harder than 7-0 through the first 7 weeks. But what they can do is maybe have the valleys be a little bit shallower and have the peaks be a little bit, or be as high as they were last year. That'd be ideal. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. Coming up next, Mike Golic Jr. is going to join me. It's going to be good. That's next, Locked On Cardinals. First, Built Bar. Another thing that's good is Built Bar. 15 grams of protein, or 18 grams of protein, 150 calories, only 9 grams of sugar. That's what makes up the birthday cake puff. That is the new amazing flavor by Built Bar. Now, it's not new, but they're featuring it at this point, okay? It's like eating birthday cake. It truly is. I had one earlier this morning. 18 grams of protein, 9 grams of sugar. Like, it's everything you want in a protein bar. And all Built Puffs are covered in 100% real chocolate. This means that with Built, you can eat healthily and actually enjoy doing it. And they're made with collagen protein, which your body absorbs more efficiently and provides tons of health benefits. Go to Built.com to get birthday cake puffs now. Go to Built.com and use promo code LOCK15 and get 15% off your order. Use promo code LOCK15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right, second segment, Locked On Cardinals. Follow me on Twitter, Clancy's Corner. Follow the podcast at Locked On AZ Cards. I'm trying to remove the memory of the Game 7 loss from your cerebellum. If you're Suns fans, unfortunately, there's a lot of similarities, as I talked about in the first segment, with how the Cardinals season ended and the Suns season unceremoniously ended last night, even though not directly correlated. But I'm here to breathe positivity. I'm here to do it. I know I get a lot of mess for not being positive all the time. There's one guy that I'm going to bring on right now. Agree, disagree with his food takes. This dude knows football more than most. Mike Golic Jr., formerly of the Four Letter Network, now doing big stuff over at DraftKings. Dude, the Gojo Show, great podcast. Thanks for joining me, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Alex. I appreciate it. And yeah, the food takes are under fire. Condiment tiers have really gotten me in the internet's hot water. But listen, I have put a lifetime of work into being a big person, and I have to put that experience to use when I have the opportunity.
Yeah, of course. Absolutely. I'm Mike Golic Jr. on Twitter. So you are the third in the trifecta of people that I've brought on that I've watched over the years. Trevor Sickham is one of my good friends. I know that you and him are close. And I put him in the category, if we're going to do the echelons as sweetest to meanest, he's always in the 0.1% of sweetest people alive. And what he did was come on and eviscerate the Cardinals offseason. And I asked him after, I'm like, Trev, what's up, bro? Is your dog sick? What the hell is going on here? And then I had Mina Kimes, another top 0.1%, even though she's a little bit more sharp-tongued than Trevor, eviscerate the Cardinals offseason. I want to, before you give me your real, pure thoughts, let's sugarcoat what's happened this offseason with the Cardinals. Kyler Murray versus the Arizona Cardinals, not ideal. I want to know where you land on that. And then the draft, let's just say, didn't necessarily play the hits with what the Cardinals needed on their roster. Tell me positive first, then from a national media member, all BS aside, what you truly think about the offseason for the Cardinals so far.
Yeah, positive spin. You appear to have gotten past that Kyler versus the team moment in this offseason that kind of dominated headlines. And I know the Chargers social media team had some fun with that in their schedule release video, but that was a big deal. And for a while, I was the first person to look at that and say, I thought it was a marketing ploy, deleting all the stuff from the Instagram, but it seems like there's some genuine tension with this team star player and the direction of the franchise and all the above. And so I don't think it can be overstated how important that is. If you're going to look at something in the way of positivity, going and getting him Hollywood Brown after, you had lost Christian Kirk to free agency in one of the more perplexing offseason deals there had been. So you could maybe spin all of that as a positive note for a team that now is going to be without its best player for the first 6 games of the season, or, one of the guys you could consider the best player in DeAndre Hopkins. So I would say just weathering that storm probably, counts for a fair amount if we're going to look at this very glass half full in this and say, all right, well, you've had all that happen. You've got Kyler at least content for right now and going into this season. And for a team that has struggled down the back half of the year, you will now get a rested DeAndre Hopkins heading into that portion of the season. So maybe there's some hope in that.
Yeah, it's interesting. And with the schedule release on top of that, Mike Golic Jr. joining me here on Locked On Cardinals. Follow me on Twitter, Clancy's Corner. Follow him. Great follow, Mike Golic Jr. I mean, it's really potpourri. You're a Jeopardy potpourri of a Twitter follow. You never really know what's going to come out next, but it's always fun. The reason why I like it, the reason why I like because building a Twitter presence is very difficult. People don't think it is. And it's I went to, and just a little name drop here, but I played basketball again to become in high school with Josiah Johnson. So King Josiah, like I see some Joe in you where it's just like there's just another level of necessary indifference and boldness with Twitter while having fun at the same time, which is a tough thing to build. So I give you credit with that for sure. I mean, but like people that are good at things have an inclination that like, listen, like you could send a tweet, be like, man, I crushed that. I say that to myself sometimes. You know exactly what I'm talking about. But
it's a beautiful feeling. I was actually talking to Josiah about that the other day of just that feeling, kind of like when a shot leaves your hands when you're playing basketball, or when you just nail a play the right way in football. I'm sure for a quarterback, when a pass leaves their hands, you do know sometimes.
I mean, what has happened to our 16-year-old self where this is what we get excited about now? I mean, I don't know what the hell has happened. But so the Cardinals offseason has been an interesting one. You're right. It seems like they've gotten past the line of no return with Kyler, where he's going to be the quarterback for the future. Blah, blah. We don't know anything when it comes to Steve Keim and Michael Bidwell, though. With the schedule release, like I was like, listen, the Cardinals need to sign a wide receiver if it's a murderer's row in the first 6 weeks. And you look at Kansas City at home, Vegas on the road, and then the Rams at home. It's close, but then they have, a winnable 6-game stretch. How important is DeAndre Hopkins to this roster? And do you think that, like, because I know that you don't watch him obviously as closely as I do, but hasn't had 10 touchdowns since he's been an Arizona Cardinal. The usage has plummeted compared to what Deshaun Watson did with him in Houston. Is he important enough to bring somebody on without him in his stead for the first 6 weeks? And I don't know maybe I'm too close to the situation. I don't know.
Yeah, I would say this. I still think DeAndre Hopkins bends the field in a way that really helps and aids everyone else in that. I understand Cliff's system and what, his version of the air raid is supposed to do might mitigate some of that. But at the end of the day, the NFL is much more of a Jimmy's and Joe's game than college football is. I'd say you can get away with scheming some stuff in college football that's benefited around 1 or 2 players, but there's a lot more experimenting that goes on there. You need the dudes. And even if the top end production hasn't been there, which I would say has been in large part due to some of the similar problems that Hopkins and those offenses saw in Houston early on there, not always being able to protect your quarterback in a way that's up to snuff, certainly things sputtering down the stretch, maybe a lack of creativity from your coordinator as the season goes on. So I still think he's that guy. The problem is like the idea of bringing someone in his stead. Who are you going to find there that's out on the street right now that might actually be able to accomplish that said same thing? I mean, DeAndre Hopkins, talent-wise, has still been one of the best in the league for a while. And as you see, guys come off the board, different signings that are already happening, Jarvis Landry most recently heading down to New Orleans that he knows super well. I don't know how many guys like that are left even in an NFL that's got a super, I think, big surplus at wide receiver right now, talent-wise.
Yeah, and I mean, you think it's going to be Hollywood Brown, you'd hope, because that's the whole idea of why they punted on drafting an edge rusher, an interior offensive lineman, a run blocker, and a corner to trade for Kyler Murray's number 1 wide receiver 6 years ago. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals, Mike Golic Jr., all over, formerly of the 4 Letter Network, now with DraftKings doing the Gojo podcast. Oh, and ask Josiah Johnson who knocked him out of the playoffs his senior year. Just ask him. Who dropped 6 threes on his team, who had no business beating him. That may or may not have been me. Coming up next, this guy played offensive line. This guy knows the offensive line more than most. There's a thick 6 thing. There's a theme that we're going to talk about towards the end as well, because I do want to pub some good stuff that you're doing with a specific charity. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals with Mike Golic Jr. We're going to finish it up next segment. First, RockAuto.com. I don't know anything about cars. I got the sports gene. I don't know if the Golic family knows about cars or not. But I don't want to go to a chain storefront. I don't want to have to ask the sir or ma'am behind the counter, hey, help me. I'm like a lost child looking for candy. I don't know how to fix my car. Help me. RockAuto.com's got you covered. You can just get in your jammies, man, and they, just type in what you need, paint, tail lamps, whatever. Go to RockAuto.com. The prices are reliably low. They're a family-owned business. They've been online for 20 years. They're like Olive Garden, man. They're family. They're not gonna upcharge you because you are the aforementioned family. Go to RockAuto.com. Right, Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices. All the parts a car will ever need. RockAuto.com. All right, final segment, Locked On Cardinals. Mike Golic Jr. joining me at Mike Golic Jr. I mean, it is a pretty big flex, even though there's a junior at the end, to have the no number necessary. Like Mina was the same thing. How can you just flex an at Mina Kimes on Twitter without a 4.6 2.9 at the end?
I will say, I think I lose that battle, which has been a theme of my life, to my own father, whose Twitter handle is now just at Golic. He's got nothing else around it. He is just at Golic. And so in the world where one word names obviously get you up into a higher plane of existence and notoriety, I think he has both earned that, but still somehow feels like a flex.
I mean, there's had to be a black market deal. Like, yeah, Golic's great, but I mean, come on. I mean, nobody's got it in life that easy. Okay. So Cardinals have had an interesting offseason. It seems like the rest of the NFL has gotten better, and the Cardinals seems to have kind of moved things around a little bit. They're a little bit more top-heavy, which is what we've seen in the Steve Keim era. I want to pivot here to the offensive line. This is for the nerds in the stands, because I've become mesmerized by Rodney Hudson. I've become mesmerized by DJ Humphries, and I've become mesmerized by Kelvin Beachum, all coming to the Arizona Cardinals in very different ways. Kelvin Beachum was a scrap heap, quote unquote, signing a couple years ago, 1 year, $2 million, and has really shore up the bookend alongside DJ Humphries. DJ Humphries was probably the best signing numbers-wise that Steve Keim has made in his tenure. 3 year, under $30 million. The dude's been very, very serviceable as a left tackle. And Rodney Hudson, I'm sure you get, googly-eyed over as a center, as being an all-pro who was voided. His contract was voided by the Raiders. And then Steve Keim is like, hey, man, I don't want to give that guy $50 million. Take a third-round pick instead. So they unvoided it and traded him, and they extended his contract, and he'll be a Cardinal for the next couple of years. First of all, tell me how important Rodney Hudson is to people that only really watch the ball when they're watching football.
Yeah, especially, as we'll talk about with the quarterback of Kyler's stature, the dictation to the offensive line, to the different positions on that group. I played center and guard, so I played along the interior, and it was we control the depth of the pocket, and the tackles control the width of the pocket. So we got to keep everyone up near the line of scrimmage so there's plenty of space for the young quarterback and a smaller quarterback to operate, because it helps with throwing lanes, the sight lines to receivers. Like, you're in charge of clearing out all that space and pass protection and trying to create those lanes with the way that you go, help each other inside, all those things. And so to have a guy as capable of going and getting them blocked up as Rodney is huge. But also, too, just experience and savvy. That's a position that's generally in charge of a lot of what you do communication-wise up front, deciding which linebacker is going to be allotted in protection, making sure the running backs are on the same page with that, with how they fit, that the quarterback knows what the deal is, being a mental resource to the quarterback, both in-game and during the week, making sure you both see that defense the same way and understand, hey, this is what we're going to get. This is what we expect in certain situations and formations. So having a guy of Rodney's caliber at that spot for a quarterback that was, a young player coming into this league, is obviously on the hunt for a second contract now, is massive. Can't be overstated. And I was amazed that the situation in Vegas played out the way it did because of how valuable he is.
Yeah, he seemed to be collateral damage for whatever the hell was going on over there, with obviously Gruden for different reasons, and then Mayock. And at the time, Mayock seemed like the home run. This is the Billy Bean of the NFL, especially, in draft capabilities with his knowledge. I don't know if you were on those calls with Mayock, the 3.5 hour, just like, how are you a human being? But yeah, the Cardinals reap the benefits. Now, on the interior, Justin Pugh has been serviceable. He's been fine when healthy as left guard coming over from New York. Okay. I was pounding the table for Zion Johnson. Obviously, his draft stock catapulted towards the last couple weeks after the Senior Bowl, after the Combine. He was no longer a secret out of Boston College. Now, I need you to explain to me and others why I call Rodney Hudson the spine. This is very rudimentary, the spine of the offensive line, and you have the guys at tackle who are serviceable, but explain, please, to people why it makes the tackles and centers job harder when the guards aren't able to be up to par with the rest of the talent of others.
Yeah, well, and I'd say this, you're right talking about the spine, because I think as we spend so much time talking about how football is sort of morphing around the different talent that's entered the league and some of the different things that you've seen offenses and defenses morph into, as the league has spread out, the spine has become even more important. We talk about that relative to safeties, linebackers, and interior D linemen on defense, but I think that's translated to the interior on offense. We saw that when Zach Martin came into the league, when Quentin Nelson, I use the Notre Dame guys as examples, but they each in their own way sort of felt like an evolution of that process and the importance that we placed on capital at those positions. And so guard sort of the gateway to both the groups that you just described, right? For the center, you're always getting help. That's why that position at times is looked at a little bit differently, because you always have help from somebody on almost every given play. The tackles are kind of the same way. You're supposed to really be on an island isolated out there, but how much help you can give to everyone else then has that ripple effect dictated by the guards. And especially now in an NFL where you're going to see lighter boxes on defense, more bodies allocated to the outside, and maybe on offense, more spread out formations, trying to take advantage of the full depth and breadth of the field. Now you task these guys on the interior with a little more in the ways of one-on-one pass protection. We've seen defenses since the New York Giants era of that NASCAR package load up on draft picks, try and get guys. I mean, hell, especially in this division, you've seen pass rushers across the board try and go light and create mismatches on the interior. So when you've got a guy that's a capable pass protector one-on-one, as some of those lighter bodies come on, it allows you to go and, always give help to the guys that were more like me, that are right along the average, right along the median as far as players there. And so while you can debate the importance on the offensive line of having one dominant player and a bunch of other guys that might be below the line of demarcation versus more guys closer to average, I always think you got to kind of have one or two guys you can really count on so that you can allocate help to those other places, because in a spread league, pass protection in drop back passing becomes an even bigger premium paid. And when you've got guys with one-on-one ability like Zion Johnson who can go out there and lock their man down, I think the ripple effect for the rest of the offense, and especially when we talk about a shorter mobile quarterback, all of those things are felt in a big way.
Yeah, and Mike Golic Jr., really well put. One more here, and it transitions very nicely to what I wanted to ask you last. Is the offensive line, especially with everything that you just said, still the most important position group in football? Or is it more malleable, more flexible to work around a lesser than, and I'm not saying the Cardinals offensive line is lesser than, but, a below average, a C- offensive line where, the 90s Cowboys would have been nothing without it? Like, are we moving away from the offensive line needing to be the most important position group?
Well, I think it depends on what you mean by that, right? Most important are you allocating the vast majority of your resources to it? Big time second contracts, first round draft picks, the way that those Cowboys lines from like 2014 to 2016 did with all those first rounders there. I think it's still the most important unit for overall team health. Like what the Cincinnati Bengals did last year is a gross outlier.
Yeah,
your quarterback normally isn't going to physically survive being sacked, like not even just hit, sacked over 60 times over the course of a long season. And so I think that's a pretty gross outlier. It's important in that if you don't have that set to at least, like you said, an average level, I think you put the valuable pieces of your team, the ones you're going to spend a ton of money on in the quarterback spot, you put them at risk physically in a way that subverts your entire franchise. And so I always think there's going to be importance there. Again, we can debate if it's better to go after a bunch of above average guys versus trying to hang your hat on some bell cows. But I also believe that with the current constraints of the NFL offseason, fewer two-a-days than we had, a decade,
right,
2 decades ago, less time on the field during the offseason program, it's a harder position to develop unless you've got one of the handful of really good offensive line coaches in the league. And I'm not sure there's that many that teams can count on developing guys with those constraints. And so I think it is worth it at this point to pay the premium for blue chip guys that come out of college programs known for developing that position, known for putting guys that are both technically and physically ready on the field. When you think Iowa, Notre Dame, Wisconsin, Alabama, Georgia, some of those traditional schools that have had those guys, if you need a guy to come in and get on the field sooner, I think you're going to have to pay a bit of a tax for that based on the current landscape of offensive line development starting from high school going up to the NFL.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, Joe Burrow looked like Willie Beeman when he gave up on his team in any given Sunday. He just got so that was 8 sacks in one game. Yeah, you're right, because it's the Jamar Chase and the offensive line. The fact they made the Super Bowl was absolutely unbelievable. T. Higgins got so much less credit than he should have with how he performed for the wide receiver position. Mike Golic at Mike Golic Jr. on Twitter, one of the best in the business. Follow me on Twitter at Clancy's Corner. Follow him at Mike Golic Jr. I want to get into this thick six before we get out of here. I don't know. Is it fuzzy math with who came up with that, or was that you? Like, don't be bashful here.
I'll take the credit for it. I
Yeah.
think it's one of those things that just happened really naturally when I was doing a digital show like 2 years ago, and it sort of grew from there. Like, I have to give a lot of credit to Jeff Schwartz, to Chris Long, to a lot of the other guys that really started pointing it out, kept, what we can call the movement going to the point where, we got to this point where all of a sudden it was showing up on College game day signs. I had actually Field Yates, the ESPN NFL insider, show me, the league sends out like their little memos of what happened during the last week, the news and notes. And when they used thick six under official NFL letterhead, I was like, all right, we've really gotten somewhere. But yeah, I'll take the credit for the origin story at this point for my broken internet brain just barfing out something that was kind of fat.
No, it's hysterical. I mean, it's anytime a big man scores a touchdown. That's what a thick six is for those that haven't heard it yet. And is there a charity tied to it with the t-shirts that you put together now?
Yeah, so I was really fortunate. The folks over at Home Field Apparel, who are, in my opinion, the finest collegiate apparel maker this side of any sort of line of demarcation. They're incredible. They are the good brand. They have done so good and so right by so many colleges. They partnered with me to celebrate the thick six, celebrate large excellence, as I've dubbed it, and those big man touchdowns, while also doing some good. So we did pre-orders for the thick six shirts on Home Field's website. All of the proceeds for that, 100% of them went towards feeding America. So while you look good supporting big people, you are also doing the thing that I think should be central to a lot of us, which is helping put food on the plates of those in need. Food insecurity is far too big a part of life for far too many people in this country. And so being able to put a slight dent in that was awesome. The support from everybody around that community was awesome. And I can't thank Home Field and everyone who ordered a shirt enough for helping in that cause.
Hell yeah. At Mike Golic Jr. on Twitter. So you've got some homework. Allie Bronson, you may want to check out the pictures that I got of you before this interview. You may want to check your girl, okay? You may want to check your girl. Mike Golic Jr., thanks so much for joining me, man. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate that. Tell Allie I said hi. I know if anyone's got the dirt on me, it's her for sure.
Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. I'll talk to you tomorrow.